Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Best Practices for Recruiting Staff in 2021 webinar. My name is Rachel Mitchell, and I am the Director of Business Development for TorontoJobs.ca, and I am joined by our President, CPA and CA, Marc Belaiche. So welcome, Marc.
Hey, Rachel, how are you?
Good, good. And welcome to all of you. We're really happy you could be here today. We've had a lot of ups and downs, as I'm sure you've been experiencing over the last 14 or 15 months from the pandemic. So a lot of things have shifted and changed, and a lot of our strategies have had to change. And as HR people, we've had to wear a lot of hats in terms of this new way of virtual interviewing, onboarding, training, the way we're communicating with our staff. Some of you may unfortunately have had to go through conducting layoffs, and that would have had to have been virtually. So a lot of things have changed, a lot of things have shifted. Kudos to all of those in HR who have been kind of being the backbone for your organization as we change our policies and change the way we conduct communicating with our staff. It's been a lot. And I know, Marc, you can attest, you're a business owner as well as, you wear an HR hat, and a lot of things have changed, I'm sure, from your perspective as well. I don't know if you want to shed a little light on that quickly before we dive into the webinar, but
well, there's so many issues going on right now. Working from home, not working from home. Can you call somebody back to an office? Can you force them to take a vaccine? We're going to talk about all those things, but there are so many interesting recruiting and HR issues going on right now, onboarding and so on. So yeah, we'll definitely talk about that through the next hour.
Absolutely. And at TorontoJobs.ca, we've seen a lot of, we're kind of a good scale of the economy in terms of, seeing trends and upward trends, and then downward trends have been very quick, before it would be kind of a slower scope or slower scale. But things have changed drastically from month to month based on reopening and closing and all those types of things. So Marc's going to walk us through. He's our employment guru, our numbers guru. He kind of studies the labor market and has a lot of really awesome data that he's compiled. He talks a lot about what's going on in the economy, just different factors, employment numbers. So I think you're going to go through that with us today, Marc. So I just kind of want to give Marc a little introduction. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do at Toronto Jobs, and then I'm going to pass it over to Marc to kind of get through the content, and then I'll be back towards the end, and hopefully we can have an interactive session and you guys can ask some questions and we can go through those for the last 10 or 15 minutes. But I just want to, let you know a little bit of background about Marc for today, because he's going to walk you through his best practices. So Marc is the president, as I mentioned, of TorontoJobs.ca, which is an internet recruitment and staffing company. Obviously, our goal is to bring the best and most qualified candidates to our clients, whether that be through our online job board, where we have our resume search as well as online postings. And then we also do recruitment. So for those tougher to fill roles, we specialize in accounting and finance, but we kind of recruit for positions all across the board. So we have those full-time services. We do temporary, permanent staffing. And a lot of people don't know we also do outplacement. So if you are conducting layoffs, we can kind of assist through that process. Toronto Jobs, I've been here for 15 years, which is seems like a lifetime. In those 15 years, we've had to shift a lot. I mean, our business we used to have an employment newspaper way back when. We used to do live events. Obviously, the economy has really impacted that over the last year and a half. We've made the fastest growing companies in Canada, which was pretty amazing. We kind of branched out and started doing an entrepreneurs conference as well. So it's been such an awesome place to work. We've gone through a lot of different services as the economy changes, and we've kept up with the market. We've shifted, we've grown, we've pivoted, and it's been kind of awesome. Marc's been in the recruiting industry, I think, since 1995, right, Marc? Prior to Toronto Jobs, you were with Prudential Insurance, and you've done some auditing. You've got an accounting background, chartered accountant by trade, I guess you could say. He's on the board of the Halton PLCA or Halton PL HR chapter. So I'm trying not to read this. I know it off the top of my head, but I should probably stick to reading it. And Marc also loves the media. He's been in a lot of different appearances on TV, radio, and talks about recruiting a lot. I mean, that's his bread and butter of his organization, and he's great at knowing what's going on in the economy and just different tactics for recruiting. So I want to let you guys know that we are going to take questions. So at the very bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A box. If you want to place your questions there, as I mentioned, I'll be back towards the end of the presentation, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you have. Again, we want to make this as interactive and live as possible. So if you have any questions, we will be glad to take those towards the end. And I just want to mention, I know I mentioned all of our services. We're doing a lot of virtual events, which have been great, you know, for kind of bringing that personalization back into things, trying to get candidates in a unique way. So we have some upcoming events in terms of HR you could attend. So we have an employment law conference on June the 25th. We bring together a lot of employment law leaders. We talk about the economy, the pandemic. Return to work is going to be a huge topic for our June HR conferences. So we have our employment law conference, that's June 25th. June 23rd, we have a general HR conference. So just a variety of speakers that are going to talk on diversity. As I mentioned, return to work. We have employment lawyers, and we have another HR conference on July the 20th. So we'll put the links in the chat as we go along here for those events. And for those of you that are hiring, we do have some exhibiting events as well. We have our virtual career fair taking place on June 29th. So that's our next one. We have some awesome companies that will be exhibiting. We have IBM, we have Metrolinx, we have Johnson Controls. So definitely if you're looking to hire staff or you just want to, you know, showcase your brand, a really great way to do that. And that's on June 29th. And then on August 11th, we have a tech-specific career fair. So if you're looking to hire in the tech sector, we also have a couple of other events. We do an event for students and a bilingual career fair as well. So as I mentioned, as we go along, I'll put the links in the chat. I know, Marc, you're going to put a lot of links in the chat as you go along here too for our social media. We're very active on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. So really awesome to follow along there. We post a lot of information on articles pertaining to HR. We do videos every other day for HR content, just our top 3 tips on different topics. And we also give information for our events that are coming up as well. So I don't want to take up too much more time. I know, Marc, you're going to go through quite a bit as well. I just want to thank everyone for being here. Thanks to Marc for putting his presentation together. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I will be back towards the end to facilitate any questions that you may have. And as we go along, we'll put some links in the chat. So hopefully some good resources for you.
Terrific. Thanks, Rachel. And welcome everybody. And hello to the Facebook community as well, watching live as well. So as Rachel mentioned, yeah, my background has been in recruiting. I've been in the business for 26 years, since 1995. Can't say I've seen everything, but man, like this year has really been something, hasn't it? If you're in the recruiting side, you know what I'm talking about. So I have also written a book called Tales from the Recruiter. And I can, for those that ask questions, I will gladly pick 1 or 2 people to send a copy of the book to, mailed free, no cost. And you can check out the book also at talesfromtherecruiter.ca. So I'm going to spend the next, I guess, 50 minutes or so running through some thoughts and observations of the jobs landscape in Canada, what I call the state of the labor market. I think it's important for you, if you're in recruiting, to really have a good idea as to what's happening in the labor market itself, as far as what Statistics Canada is reporting, monthly job numbers, that is, and also what other trends are happening in the labor force. Because if you are recruiting, you want to kind of have a good handle on that, because it will help you target your searches and understand what might be going on as well. Then I'm going to share my top 10 tips of best practices for recruiting staff for this year and perhaps beyond. And then we'll take some questions and should wrap up within the hour as well. Now, again, if you are if you ask a question, you'll be eligible to win a complimentary copy of my book mailed to you at no charge. So I'd like to start off these presentations by just talking about the state of the Canadian labor market. And one of the things that really interests me is the job numbers that come out. And they come out typically on the first Friday of a month. Now, if you've been watching and following all along, you'll know that in January and February of 2020 last year, we had a booming economic environment for jobs and labor. The unemployment rate was actually at the lowest it's ever been in Canadian history. It was just over 5%. Now, the pandemic hit in March and April, hit a lot of people. There were 3 million Canadians that lost their jobs, and the unemployment rate literally spiked to the highest unemployment rate ever recorded in Canadian history in May of 2020 at just over 13%. Then as the year progressed, June through November, we actually had positive job creation every single month. And in fact, there were some months that were off the way out of left field kind of thing in terms of job creation that were fantastic. December hit and January hit of 2020 to 2021, and we had started having lockdowns. And if you remember in Ontario, that was just after Labor Day or after Boxing Day that we had these issues. So the unemployment rate started turning to negatively. More jobs were lost. We had the lockdowns and so on. February and March actually were fairly good job creation. April wasn't that great of 2021. And then here we are with the last numbers being May of 2021. So let's dive into those a little bit more in detail. So for the month of April, there were 68,000 jobs that were lost. And that was primarily as a result of third wave restrictions. Now, these are May numbers, by the way. Almost all the decline was in part-time work. Ontario and Nova Scotia accounted for most of the overall decline in May. Now, employment actually increased from a province perspective in Saskatchewan, and I'll come back to Saskatchewan soon. And depending on where you're watching here, you'll want to know some trends, because one of my points is about labor force and looking at people across Canada. But overall, the unemployment rate currently stands at 8.2% in May. And again, these are the last numbers that are available. At the beginning of July, we'll get the June numbers as well. The number of Canadians working from home is at 5.1 million. And if you look at the total number of people working, which is 18.6 million, we're about 1/3 of Canada's population is working from home right now, which is very similar to the numbers that are coming from the US as well. Now, from people working in May part-time, almost a quarter of them wanted a full-time job, and this was up from about 20% or 18% that was looking for that full-time job in February of 2020. So just to compare before the pandemic to after the pandemic. Now, one of the numbers that we really look at is long-term unemployment. This is the number of people that have been unemployed for 27 weeks or more. And that is just under 500,000 in May. So 480,000 Canadians have been off work, unemployed for 27 weeks or more, which is a really, really high number. In May 2021, the unemployment rate among returning students was 23%. These are students who are going back to school. And that was compared to 40% in May of 2020. So the job picture looked much better this year for students than it did last year, of course. And that compares to 13% in May of 2019, before the pandemic hit the year before. So overall, number of people unemployed, 1.652 million of people across Canada, 18.6 million people working in Canada right now. The unemployment rate for men 25 years of age and over is 6.9%, and for women 25 years of age and over is 7%. So you might say, well, wait a sec, Mark, you said the unemployment rate is 8.2% across Canada. Men and women over 25 years of age, you're around 7%. Where is the difference? Well, this is where the youth rate, unemployment rate comes into play. The youth unemployment rate for those 15 to 24 years of age, male and female, is approximately 16%. So really increasing the unemployment rate across Canada. Now, across Canada, the province with the lowest unemployment rate, I mentioned they had good job creation in the last month, is Saskatchewan at 6.3%. Remember, across Canada, the national average is 8.2%. The province with the highest unemployment rate is Newfoundland and Labrador at 13.4%. Ontario's unemployment rate, 9.3%, so 1 percentage point above the Canadian average. And the city with the highest unemployment rate across Canada, and I'll talk about why I'm mentioning this a little bit later, is Belleville, Ontario at 11.0%. Now, Belleville, Ontario is about 2 hours east of Toronto. The city with the lowest unemployment rate across Canada is Trois-Rivières, Quebec, 4.2%. And amongst the larger cities, Vancouver is at 7.5%, so under the national unemployment rate, and Toronto is at 9.6%. So quite a bit above the national unemployment rate. And in the US, very quick snapshot, the US added 560,000 jobs in May, and that fueled more hope about the pandemic and the recovery. And this was about twice the previous month's gains. Now, the biggest job gains there were in leisure and hospitality as people really came back to bars and restaurants. And the unemployment rate in the US is 5.8%. Now, you might say, well, wow, 5.8% compared to 8.2% in Canada. That's a big difference. Well, the US measures and announces the unemployment rates very differently than Canada and calculates them very differently. So they will always pretty much have a lower unemployment rate in terms of what's publicly announced. Now, as I said, one of my favorite days is the first Friday of the month. So we'll probably be getting the June numbers possibly on June 9th or July 2nd, I should say, or July 9th. Now, other trends that are going on, and again, the more you know about trends and what's happening in the labor market, the better it is going to be for you to do your recruiting and understand where things are where things are headed. So what other trends are going on right now? Well, immigration in Canada. Things are certainly on hold. A lot of immigration is not happening right now, but the plan for Canada over the next 3 years is to bring in 1.2 million immigrants into the country. And this is Immigration Minister Marco Mendocino's plan to seek and to fill workplace shortages and boost Canada's economy. So they plan on bringing in 400,000 people in each year. And he said, Canada needs more workers and immigration is the way to get there. Now, refugee and immigration policy researcher at the University of Calgary came up with some number crunching, and he tweeted that if the government meets its goals, the next 3 years will be the highest years on record in Canada immigration since 1911. And out of the 400,000, approximately 230,000 are from the economic class of immigrants. 100,000 are family members of people already here in Canada. 60,000 are refugees and other protected persons. And another 6,000 people will be accepted on humanitarian grounds. Now, if you remember Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, former Prime Minister of Canada, he had a message for Canadians and he said, we need people a lot more. And he said he wants and thinks that Canada's population should grow to 100 million people by the year 2100. In 2019, this is an interesting stat, immigration was responsible for more than 80% of Canada's population growth. You might think that as new kids being born and so on, but 80% of Canada's population growth in 2019 was through immigration. So other items, obviously with borders being closed, it's going to hinder and impact the numbers of immigrants that are coming to Canada, but it's certainly a strategy and it's to be, you should know about it from a recruiting perspective. And as far as what Canadian and economists think for Canada in 2021, they think that it's going to be a churn and burn type of model where there's going to be a rapid flow of old jobs lost and new jobs being created. And they see that because of the pandemic, it's changed the way the work world is. These economists estimate that there's not going to be much of a change in overall unemployment rate, but Canadians will be on the move from one opportunity to the next. They also predict that there's going to be more auto jobs as people move out of the city and buy vehicles to get around, and that there's going to be more growth in mental and physical health services and also logistics as well. So it kind of makes sense given everything that's going on. So you may have heard the term she-cession or she-recession. This is what's happening right now in that a lot of the jobs, the majority of the jobs, in fact, about 60 to 65% of jobs that have been lost over the last 15 months or so have been female positions. This is as a result of industries that have been hit hard, have been women industries that staff women in those roles. That includes travel, tourism, retail, food services, and hospitality. All these industries have been hard hit. So the term she-cession has been used to describe what's going on. Now, on the positive side, most of the jobs that have been coming back over the course of the last year or so have been female. About 60 to 65% of jobs have been coming back, have been female. Now, if you are old enough to remember, in 2008 and 2009, we had a credit crisis. And back then, it was what was called a he-cession, because the jobs that were lost were primarily in male-dominated industries like manufacturing. So there were 60 to 65% of jobs that were lost were in the manufacturing sector. But there's no doubt that we are in the midst of what's called a K-shaped recovery, my fancy K here. On the upper end of the K, you'll get companies like Amazon and Zoom and so on, who have done very well during this time. And other companies that have not done so well, some of the industries that I mentioned already, being travel, tourism, hospitality, retail, and so on. Now, the problem is this is not much of a recovery when you have this downward slope. It's not where's the recovery? And that is obviously going to take a long time to recover those jobs. The problem is a lot of those jobs in those industries are vulnerable workers, part-time employees, students, youth, and so on. And hence, that's why you see and have seen a big spike in unemployment at that level. But it's no doubt that that area deals with low hourly workers and students who tend to be the first ones that are terminated during a downturn. Now, Canadians working from home, I mentioned that there were just about 5 million Canadians working from home. At the height of the shutdown in April, just over 40% of people worked at least half their usual hours at home. So you're looking at about 7 million people that were actually working from home. Now, CIBC just announced recently that they will keep workers home until September, and they're going to add flexible policies, and they're going to plan on blending on-site and remote work once they're able to get their employees to return. And we'll talk about that soon as well in my top 10 tips. Now, if you're just joining, again, my name is Marc Belaiche. I'm president of TorontoJobs.ca. Welcome to the event. Feel free to post a question in the chat, and I will get to them at the end of the session. COVID-19 is hurting women's careers, of course. Research from LinkedIn has been finding that female employees are definitely being disproportionately impacted and more stressed than their male counterparts by work-related issues. There's no doubt that women have had more of the time and requirements to stay home than their male counterparts. 74% of women suffer from employment stress, compared to only 57% of men. Now, obviously, women's careers have been very damaged during the course of the pandemic, staying home and not being able to follow their careers for many people. So, and finally, on the kind of state of the labor market and so on, the World Bank fears that a lingering impact from the virus, what it warned, basically saying that because of the virus, it warns that there could be a lost decade, especially for countries that failed to get on top of the pandemic early. So let me turn to my top 10 tips and best practices for recruiting and hiring. I've been doing this for a long time, and if I did this presentation 2 years ago, it would be different from where it is today. So I'm going to share with you my thoughts on what you should be doing as a recruiter, as an employer, and so on. So I'm going to put them in the chat. I'm going to put these in the chat so you can follow along. So the first one item in here is learning to be more adaptable. Now, a lot of you may have already figured that out and have made changes to how your company is organized, allowing people to work from home, not work from home, but really analyze your current business model. Is it working? Always review it. And ask people, but companies are now accommodating the employee more than ever in how the work gets done and the hours. And if you think, you know what, there'll be somebody else who will, if they leave, somebody else will come along, we'll be able to find somebody easily. Think again, because it's not as easy as you might think. Point number 2, kind of along the same lines as the first one, but point number 2 is being more open to remote work, even more than you are right now. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, but think about if your employees just continued to work full-time from home after the pandemic. If you're still feeling hesitant, would you be okay with part-time? So really having a in-depth, concrete communication plan with remote workers going forward. I know that candidates, one of the first questions they are asking right now is, will I be able to work from home at this new position? Do I have to go to the office? And it may be the case now, it may be different a year from now, but as of now, people really want to work from home and they want to continue to work from home. They want to have that flexibility, whatever that means for them. Now, also keep in mind that those applied to openings as well at your organization are probably already asking more and more about remote working options. So add that to your job descriptions as well to save time. Make it clear that, yes, this is a work from home opportunity. But it's amazing how quickly companies have gone from really scrutinizing whether their employees should be allowed to work from home to an environment where it's expected in many cases and to be allowable and to have people working from home. But generally, we find that statistically, our client base and our contacts is about a third right now. So about a third of people are working from home all the time, which I kind of mentioned earlier. A third of people are working in an office or an environment right now where they have to be in an office or a warehouse, for example. Think of Amazon, for example. And then 1/3 have a hybrid type of model. So 2 days in the office, 3 days at home, 3 days in the office the next week, 2 days at home, and so on. Now, number 3 on my list of 10. Again, if you're just joining, my name is Marc Belaiche. I'm president of TorontoJobs.ca. Thanks for attending. Feel free to ask some questions and I will get to them at the end of the section. So number 3, improving employee mental health and wellness. This has been very, very well documented over the last little while, how COVID and people working from home and the changes have impacted their mental health and wellness. So make sure to provide more tools and resources for staff on how to improve their well-being, and make sure your employees are taking mental health days and helping members of your company communicate more about their concerns. Now, if you have any programs available, make sure to communicate that with your employees and remind them of the programs that you have available. It's obviously a serious issue right now, especially with people working from home, isolation, individual, and so on. We hope that things will improve certainly over the next 3 months, but the damage will continue on for quite a while. So it's okay to talk about it, and it seems like more and more employees and employers are discussing it as well. So make sure to have it front and center, and don't be afraid to speak about it. Number 4 on my list is creating better employee engagement. So how are you maintaining engagement among your staff, especially for those who live alone? Schedule casual Zoom meetings with your employees. Encourage staff to reach out to one another, at least as a starting point. And have mentors and partners for employees and have them check in on each other. But when it comes to recruiting, talk about what programs are available. And it kind of goes to my last point as well, is what programs do you have for mental health and what programs do you have to engage employees, and make sure to communicate that during the recruiting process. People really like that. We had one client who met with a candidate, and they had an HR person before they met with the other ones. And the HR person really did a great job of communicating the culture and mental health and what the expectations are before they met with the more senior level person within the hiring area. So make sure to communicate that, because employees and prospective employees, whether they ask for it or not, they are interested in that. Number 5, updating your company perks. And I'm just putting them in the chat here again, but updating your company perks. So your employees' needs have changed. There's no doubt about it, especially if they're working from home. So what you want to do is you want to review your company's benefit package to ensure that it has more mental health and wellness options for your staff when they're feeling burnt out, or include something that will go beyond the current pandemic situation and is going to boost productivity and morale. But some of the companies that we've talked to, they've changed the benefit plan. In fact, they've removed certain things from it because people aren't using it working from home, and added new things. So I'll give you some examples. They've given some credit for employees to purchase new desks or chairs up to a certain amount. They've reimbursed their internet, or they've adapted their benefit plan to provide other perks that might not have been as important before the pandemic hit. So there may be benefits that your company is paying for that is not being used. Those funds can be redeployed to other perks. So talk to your benefits provider if you have one, or whatever your program is, and ask them what you might be able to swap, and make sure to communicate those in the recruiting process. Now, depending on how many positions you have, this may or may not apply to you, but in general, it probably should. Number 6, automate as much of your recruiting process as possible. Now, some companies have really used the pandemic to redevelop their entire recruiting process. For example, Amazon has made their recruitment process for some shift workers all automated to the point that there's never actually an interview. The person shows up for their shift. So they've redesigned, they've reconfigured the whole process for shift workers to the point that the person just shows up for their shift. Now, can you do that in your organization? Can you reinvent? Can you re-engineer the process? You know what your process is. The bigger the company, the more you've reinvented. The smaller the company, maybe it's going to be a little bit more difficult and you're relying on older school methodology. I'm happy to talk to you. If you want to go over your recruiting process, feel free to reach out to me. I can share some suggestions with you. I'm always up for that. I have no problem with that. Another example, there's somebody called Robot Vera, and Vera is Russian, and she can make 1,000 calls a day. In fact, she can make thousands of calls a day, and she can conduct 50,000 interviews daily, and she can answer questions, and she works 24 hours a day, and she never has to attend meetings, and she doesn't require sleep, and she can work in any time zone, and she will delete duplicate resumes. You get the picture. Robot Vera is not a human. Vera is a robot. She can speak 68 languages, including English, Russian, and Arabic. And she's being trained to recognize emotions like stress and sarcasm during interviews. So think about your entire process, including onboarding, not just the attraction part of it, and think of what you can automate. So that's number 6 on my list. Number 7, look at across Canada and around the world for employees. So I mentioned about Belleville, Ontario being the highest unemployment rate across Canada of 33 metropolitan areas that Statistics Canada looks at every month. Well, if you know that that unemployment rate, that area has a high unemployment rate, well, you can go after that area, and there's good people that are living there that could be good for your roles, provided, of course, that they can work remotely if you're not in the Belleville area. So really number 7, I should say, number 7 point is look at across Canada and around the world for employees. Working remotely might be the new thing, or it may disappear eventually. Nobody really knows. But the reality is we're here, we're in it right now. And there's no clear indication of what the work environment is going to look like in the future. No one can really clearly know what it's going to be like. But with people being close to an office being less of an issue, look beyond geographic constraints to find staff. And that could be across Canada. It could be in North America. It could be around the world. So go to areas where higher unemployment exists. If you're able to accommodate remote work, you're going to have more leverage. And you should also look at government programs available. There's lots of them out there. Obviously, the wage subsidy, there's hiring of students, there's training grants and more. So keep an eye out for everything that's available and look across Canada, because you might find somebody in Vancouver that might be really good for your role if you're not in Vancouver. Number 8 on the list is spelling out expectations for being available and not being available. Candidates want to know what are their expectations? Are they going to be needed all the time? Are they going to be at a computer all day long on Zoom calls? So let people know during the interview process what the expectations are for how many Zoom meetings there are and what the obligations are. Try to cap the amount of time that people are on Zoom. Allow for breaks. People are still looking for work-life balance, even though it's a different kind of work-life balance than before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, work-life balance was being able to work from home, maybe not working as many hours during the day, but now people are looking for a different kind of work-life balance when they're already at home. Number 9 on the list, job seekers are more in tune with health and safety than they ever were. They want to know, do you have safeguards? Are there sanitizing stations? Is there plexiglass between employees and anyone customer interfacing? Do you provide sick days? That's always been a hot issue, or it's been recently a hot issue. People are afraid of calling in sick because they might lose their job or not get paid. So what's your policy? Make sure candidates that you're interviewing that are coming forward, that are applying, they know and understand that. And what's your company doing overall? Make sure to communicate that. If people are working from home, well, that's one thing, but it's a different kind of health and mental health that I talked about before that might exist when somebody is working from home. And number 10 on my list, but I'm actually going to throw in number 11 bonus one as well for you. Number 10, making sure everything is much more visible. So think of your job descriptions. A lot of them are very old school. You have a bunch of words on a piece of paper or on a page, on a PDF or whatever it is. Use videos, have links to videos, make it more colorful, make it more attractive for people to apply. Link postings to your social media as well. LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even Snapchat. It really depends on what type of jobs you're looking to fill. I mean, you know that if you have a CFO role, you're not going to necessarily post it on Snapchat, but think of where your target audience is looking and how you can use your social media to get the word out about jobs. I've heard all the pros and cons and all the good things and the bad things about recruiting and what candidates are saying. Candidates have lots of complaints. They complain about applying and not hearing back. They complain about going for an interview and never hearing back. They complain about the processes being too long. And employers complain about candidates not showing up, as do employees, by the way, job seekers. They also complain about ghosting by employers. So make sure to have a good brand and a good system for connecting with people that have been selected for interviews and not selected for interviews, or if they've been interviewed but haven't heard back. I hear it more and more often, unfortunate for the recruiting industry as far as I'm concerned, that people are going for interviews and they follow up and they follow up and they follow up, and recruiters don't let them know, you know what, we filled the position somewhere else. They just hide behind computers or the fact that they're working from home and so on. I get, because I've heard this so much on our recruiters panels and so on, that it's very difficult, and the average job seeker doesn't understand that you might be working on 8 to 10 jobs, you're getting hundreds of applications. But if somebody at least came for an interview, I believe that you should at least respond to them. So try to do that. It'll build your brand, it'll build your name as well, and it will help you in the future. And if that means, you know, having to work an extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour or whatever, you know, it really is worthwhile. But coming back to making everything more visual, having a social media strategy, connect with your marketing people to see how you can use the social media of your organization to advertise about open positions. Really good to have. And number 11, it's a bonus today. Bonus number 11 is train your line managers on interviewing virtually in practice. The issue is that it's one thing for you to have your line managers interview with you in the room or close by. It's another thing when they don't know how to interview candidates by video. So practice with them, give them direction. I have seen so many poor interviews being done by line managers right now. I had one company that the person was outside in their backyard. And it's not, there still needs to be a level of professionalism when you're interviewing people. So you may understand that, you may know that, but your line managers may not or may not understand that. So make sure to definitely give them direction, give them some tips. So make sure to advise them about having good lighting and no kids screaming in the background and the camera angle that they're using and making sure they're on time for an interview. This is really important. I've seen people, oh, I'm late, so the person is sitting there for 10 minutes not knowing if they have the right Zoom link or whatever. So make sure that you train your line managers as well. And if you are the one doing the interviews, make sure to do them a lot better as well. So I do have a number of links on upcoming events that you may be interested in as well. And then we'll take some questions as well. See some questions here come in. So the Canadian Virtual HR Conference happens on Wednesday, June 23rd, which is next week. If you're in HR, the Canadian Employment Law Conference happens on Friday, June 25th. So next Friday. Great opportunity to hear from employment lawyers. What are the issues that are going on right now? There are a ton of employment law issues going on right now, which is going to be really interesting over the next few weeks and few months, and then even into next year, including, can an employer make an employee take a vaccine? Can an employer force a company to take, or force an employee to take a COVID test? Can an employer force an employee to show their COVID that they've taken the vaccines? All kinds of different things going on. Can an employer force someone to come back to work? So it'll be very interesting, and a lot of shifts will happen over the next little while where companies and employees are going through a push and pull kind of thing, a tug of war, so to speak, where it's like, well, who has the right, and can an employee say no and still be employed? Can an employer terminate them for not coming back to the office? So really important things that are going to be coming down the pipe pretty soon over the next little while. The Canadian Virtual Recruiters Panel happens on Monday, June 28th. I'll be moderating a group of recruiters, so you can register for that at no cost as well. And then the Canadian Virtual Career Fair that happens on Tuesday, June 29th. So if you're looking to hire, which I'm guessing you are, if you're on this session, you might want to exhibit at that event. It's a great way to have a connection with people as well. And that's the other side of it, is shifting to virtual events, shifting to being able to interview people virtually and by Zoom or otherwise. Really important trend. Obviously, in the recruiting world, it has been going on for a long, long time. But for the average employer, average organization, Zoom might be new from an interviewing perspective because they were always interviewing within the office. So just keep that in mind, that is also changing as well. Now, we do have a whole bunch of other upcoming events. We run 13 to 15 virtual events a month, and I'm putting in the link in the chat here of a list of all our upcoming events. We have controllers conferences, CFO conferences, Sell Your Business conference, and many, many more. So check that out. And if you are looking at exhibiting at perhaps some upcoming job search events, I'm just putting the link in as well at our affiliated sister division, Event Logic with a K.ca. And there's lots of sponsorship and exhibitor options also available that you can connect with employers and employees and other job seekers and so on. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I did write the book called Tales from the Recruiter. It's a recruiter's perspective on how to find the perfect job. You can read it online at talesfromtherecruiter.ca. And it's not just for finding a job. It's also, if you're a recruiter or if you're new to recruiting, perhaps, there's some good tips in there on how to use, how to be a better recruiter. And then as mentioned by Rachel earlier on, we also have our TorontoJobs.ca recruitment services division. So we provide temporary, contract, and full-time recruitment. And then our online services as well, where you can post a job, you can search resumes, you can check out our outplacement division that Rachel also had mentioned earlier. And we also have a lot of great YouTube videos. So we have a YouTube channel where we've been collecting from our virtual events and so on. We have literally hundreds of videos on all kinds of topics that you can check out. So that's our TorontoJobs.ca YouTube channel. And then we also have a YouTube channel for recruiters, which is there's hundreds of videos there on recruiting topics as well. You can watch it. You can pick up some tips that might be of interest to you as well. And you can follow all of TorontoJobs.ca on all our social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And I'm just throwing in the Linktree link to all our social media. You can check that out. Hopefully you can follow us and retweet some of our postings and become members of our groups. And then we also have a Linktree for Toronto recruiters. So lots of great stuff in there. So if you're a recruiter, you want to join in to that as well. And then we also have tech staffing that we are involved with, and with Canada becoming more and more tech staffing savvy, or a tech country, we have various social media links in there. So I'm just posting the tech area now for our Facebook Live group audience. If you are not seeing the links and you'd like them, just feel free to message me and I'm happy to share those links with you. And then we also have financial staffing links as well. So if you're in the market for financial staff, you can also connect there. So as I mentioned, we have a number of different services: recruitment, temporary and permanent. We have our job boards. We run a number of job fairs and virtual events. And we're also in the process of launching a new recruitment platform. It's going to be called Gahuza, and that will be coming in the next few months as well. And then finally, I will just share with you my contact information, which is on the chat here as well. And I will type in my email address as well, so you have it. But you can certainly connect with me on LinkedIn if there's anything I can help you out with. You can email me if you'd like. And again, if you're watching through Facebook, you can just message me through LinkedIn, and I'm happy to give you some more information and help you out. Feel free to give me a call if there's anything I can help you out with as well. So that kind of finishes and wraps up the 10 tips. I want to thank you for being on. We're going to cover some questions as well. If you have any, feel free to put them in the Q&A area, and I'm happy to check things out. I know Rachel will be coming back soon as well, so we can talk about some issues. And Rachel's always got some great perspectives on recruitment as well, having been in the industry for a good 15 years now, right, Rachel?
Yes, it's crazy. People always say that time goes by so fast, but it's, when it happens to you, it's it's even faster. We do have some questions coming in, which is great. If anyone has any questions, again, you can put them in the bottom of the Q&A box. Don't be shy to ask questions. We love, for this to be interactive. Are you ready for questions, Marc? If we take a couple? Yeah. Okay, awesome. So we'll go through the first question. So with the pandemic over the past 15 months or so, many companies have embraced a culture of allowing employees to continue working remotely even after the pandemic ends. What are your suggestions for companies who are not necessarily crazy by this model and have more of a traditional approach to work? Will they be left behind on attracting good candidates? I think that's a great question. I think a lot of people are probably wondering the same thing.
Okay, sorry. I think my internet just froze there for a second, Rachel.
No problem. Do you want me to reread it?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. With the pandemic over the last 15 months or so, many companies have embraced a culture of allowing employees to continue working remotely even after the pandemic ends. What are your suggestions for companies who are not necessarily crazy about this model and have more of a traditional approach to work? Will they be left behind on attracting good candidates?
Right. So yeah, this is the million-dollar question, really, right? What's going to happen after this? Are people just going to be able to call their employees back? I mean, I've seen so many people, and as most of you probably know, the real estate market in areas, say around the Greater Toronto area, has skyrocketed. The prices have skyrocketed because people just have taken off and literally moved away. I know somebody who moved from Brampton, Ontario to Paris, Ontario. Just for part of that reason. Why do I have to be in Brampton? I can be anywhere. So it's a great question. I think let me answer it maybe in a couple of other. Let me answer it maybe by looking at the different perspectives for a second, right? So for those companies that are saying, hey, look, we're older school. We don't think that working from home is something that we want, and we don't want that in our culture. Yes, you probably will have a problem attracting new staff to come to you, certainly in the short term. Maybe in the medium to longer term, it might change, but certainly in the short term, people are, when I interview them, I'd probably say at least 50% are saying they would prefer to work from home. At least 50%, maybe even it's higher, maybe 2/3, maybe 3/4. So if you say, look, you will be expected to work from the office, your pool has shrunk. The pool of candidates has shrunk, which means that you're going to have less candidates to choose from. You might still find the perfect candidate within that, but your pool has reduced. So those are for the ones who have said, look, this is our model. We want people to come in to the office, and we expect that. You're going to have less candidates to choose from. For the ones who are currently have an office and they're trying to bring people back, the model, my understanding, and I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is that the employer can mandate for an employee to come back to the office. Now, are they going to use that, and are they going to force people to come back to the office? That's going to be the touch and go situation, because I think there was a company in the US that has said, we're bringing people back, and there's been a revolt. So I think you're going to get that. And the other element of it is if you say to certain people, new people, you have to work in the office, and they see, well, like 3/4 of your staff is working at home, why do I have to be the one to be in the office? So if there's a reason to be in the office, I feel, maybe answering the phone, packages coming in, deliveries, warehouse, whatever, you need them there. But think of I always think of the job seeker, and the job seeker is the one that dictates a lot of things. If you tell them in the ad or posting or on the interview that they're expected to be in the office and they don't want to, you never hear from them again. So keep that in mind. Does that help? Anything that you would add to that, Rachel?
No, I was just going to actually, your concluding comment there, I was just going to say a lot of people are looking for that in the posting now, whether it's a remote work from home type of role, and it might deter, like you're saying, people at this point from applying to the position. So you might be missing out on those types of candidates. So I think it's almost, necessary now to put it in the posting if you're a hybrid, if you're working remotely, if it's in the office type of role, because you might be missing out on those candidates. That's for sure. And I think it also depends on the role that you're recruiting for, whether or not some people have the expectation that the role is going to be in the office. But I think a lot of the roles that, even myself, I have less chit chat conversations with people in the office. I find myself more productive. I used to sit in traffic for 45 minutes each way, and now I can use those 45 minutes for working out or doing my laundry or whatever, instead of commuting, and I log in earlier than I normally would get to the office because I'm not sitting in traffic. So you really have to kind of evaluate as a leader or a manager, can my staff be just as productive, and weigh the pros and cons of why you want it to still be a traditional model also. Because a lot of people, I know we do a lot of polls like on our social media, and a lot of hiring people are saying, hiring managers or managers are saying that their employees are just as productive from home, and they haven't noticed any decrease in productivity or revenues or anything like that. So there's a lot of things, I think, and options you have to really sit down and weigh, because every instance is different for every company. But I think the expectation is there that it's going to at least be a hybrid model for most companies if you can.
Yeah, and your question about why is whether a job seeker asks an employer or not, or a potential employer one that they're interviewing, why do I have to be in the office? And if you don't really have a good reason other than, you know what, we're just old school and that's the way it is, you're not going to be able to attract those as many candidates as you would if you just said, yeah, you know what, we can accommodate working from home, because they're thinking that themselves. And one other story, and I know, you and I talked about this before, Rachel, is that the hook for getting candidates in the past has primarily been the number one reason, especially in the Greater Toronto area, the number one reason why people wanted to leave their jobs before the pandemic was to reduce their commuting time.
Right.
But now that the commuting time has been really reduced, the hook is not there anymore. And if you now bring them back to the office, it's kind of counter to that. Is now you're extending their commute, you're extending the amount of time, and you're not destroying, but you're hurting their work-life balance. And while there's less cars on the road and people can get around more, people have started to get used to working from home, and they're okay with it. And it's really changed. It's amazing how quickly the world changed around March 15th of 2020,
Yeah,
hasn't it?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
But yeah, there's so many, we could go on and continue talking about this for quite some time. But you really have to, I think, digest your company, really dissect what you need and what you don't need from like you're saying, Marc, a company perspective, have really good reasoning as to why that person needs to work in the office. But from a recruiter's perspective or a hiring perspective, I know for our internal hires, it's kind of been nice to go outside of, we're used to searching in postal codes and wanting to hire someone really close to our office. And it's kind of been nice to be able to go outside of that and hire talent that might be an hour away or even 2 hours away. from our office, I'm seeing that we can draw from a bigger talent pool if we're a little more open and flexible to where that person lives. And maybe we only require them to come in every 2 weeks. Maybe it's an hour and a half commute for them, but if they're only doing it once every 2 weeks to have a meeting or sit together and strategize, and the rest is online, I think that if recruiters can be open to it, they might be able to grab a better talent or a better hire, because you're not just relying on the biggest factor is, oh yeah, that person lives close, so they'll be in the office on time every day, right? That was a big thing. Postal code search was a huge thing, and now it's becoming smaller and smaller as people kind of can hire, like you're saying, from Brampton to where did the person move to?
Paris. So,
Paris, right?
Yeah, Paris, Ontario.
I just met a person that actually sold everything they own and they moved to Costa Rica, and they're working from there indefinitely. They have a short-term rental with the intention of buying a house there, and they're going to work from there. And that's kind of, they never need to be in the office again. So just interesting, the dynamic and everything that's happening. That was a very long-winded answer. I hope we helped or confused, or I'm not sure what we did. That was a good brainstorming session, but hopefully we were able to be some benefit to that question.
Well, graphic designers too, right? Graphic designers, gig employees, like why do you need them close by? So the world has collapsed, hasn't it?
Absolutely. So I think we have time to take one more question. We have a few minutes left. So someone's asking, when do you foresee interviews returning to being back to in-person?
That's a great question. It's so hard to foresee. I truly think that I think there's some companies that have just said we're not going to interview anybody more in person, and they've just pivoted completely to hiring people virtually. And as far as recruiters go, like in staffing companies, we've been interviewing people virtually for a long time. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years. It started before with Skype, and that's kind of not there anymore. Zoom is the game, or Microsoft Teams or whatever. But recruiters have been doing it a long, long time. And we always said, well, why do we have to meet somebody in person? It speeds up the whole process. So it's a good question. I think it's a hard one to ask. Answer, I should say. You need to assess on your own as to whether you need to interview somebody in person, or you can just interview them through a virtual platform, Zoom, Teams, or otherwise. And will it ever come back? I don't think so. I mean, I don't know that it's going to come back the way we know it, or the way we're used to it. I think companies that are on the forefront are going to make offers just on a virtual basis. And what difference does it make if they're there or not there, especially if they're working from home? It probably doesn't matter. So that's happening a lot. I remember, maybe a couple of years ago, somebody made an offer for the first time by never meeting the person. And then the pandemic just sped that whole process up, where people are like just saying, hey, I don't need to meet you. I see you. I understand you. I'm asking you all the questions. Why do I need to meet you? So kind of hard to think that it's going to come back the way it was, but there's going to be always companies that are going to want to hire people internally. I talked about the Amazon example, where they have people from shift workers. They just show up. They never even talk to anybody on an actual live interview in the traditional sense. It was all automated. The person just shows up. Imagine that.
Yeah, it's definitely a different world. I do think, from my perspective, I still do like to have that, somewhat personalization. I manage people, and I do, want them to feel like I will go out of my way to meet them in person. They're going to work for an organization. I want them to know kind of me in person and who I am and our culture and that sort of thing. So again, I think it's going to be a case per case basis. Amazon, completely different if you're hiring for an in-office, type of role, or they're going to be dealing with clients, especially. I want to see kind of how they conduct themselves outside of this box kind of thing.
In the box.
Yeah, but it's it's again, every situation is going to be different for every company, every position. It's going to be different. But I think virtual for sure, we've learned is just as effective. And if we can be effective and save time is our most valuable asset. If you can be effective and save time, you know, most people are going to choose that route because, you know, we don't have a lot of time in a work week or in a work day. You know, so if we can save time and be more productive, I think that's going to be the answer in most cases. So,
You don't have to put your jacket down. You don't have to, hey, are you waiting around? You turn on your computer, you turn on your Zoom, and you're right there.
That's right. That's right. It's a little exhausting sometimes. I'm sure all of you are Zoom exhausted. I sometimes get Zoom exhausted, but yeah, it's nice to not have the commute and the hustle and bustle and kind of slow down a little bit. The pandemic has taught me to slow down, that's for sure, if anything positive has come out of it. But we want to thank everyone for being here. Thanks for asking your questions. If you have any additional questions, Marc shared his contact information. I will put mine in here as well. So you can reach out to us anytime if you have any staffing needs or you just have any questions about recruiting or you just want to chat. We're always around and available, and we've got a lot of expertise in the Toronto area especially. But thank you for joining us. I know Marc put all the links in the chat for just contact information, our social media. We have a lot of awesome content on our YouTube channels, so definitely check those out. But thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. I don't know, Marc, if you have any final words.
Thanks for organizing, Rachel. Thanks to all of you for being on, taking the time. And yeah, like Rachel said, feel free to reach out to us and see if we can help you out with anything.
Absolutely. Well, everyone have a great afternoon and happy virtual hiring.
Thanks so much, Rachel.
All right. See you guys later.
Thanks, everybody.